is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. 17 people under arrest as Haiti says a hit squad was behind the president's assassination.
Our other headlines, all in the same boat. G20 finance ministers meeting in Venice agreed to pull together on corporate tax.
Holidays on hold. The EU considers reimposing travel restrictions as the Delta variant spreads.
Maria, Murraya.
That is correct.
And the sweet spell of success. A 14-year-old from Louisiana becomes the first African-American winner of the U.S. National Spelling Bee. A hit squad made up of 28 foreign mercenaries is said to be behind the assassination of Haiti's president, according to the police, who say they're still hunting for the masterminds.
17 suspects detained after a gun battle were paraded before the media, along with a slew of weapons, including assault rifles, machetes and sledgehammers. Police say 15 of those captured are Colombian and 2 are American citizens. 3 were killed during the firefight and 8 others are still on the run.
These assailants, the thugs who killed the president, we have caught them, we have captured them. They are in the hands of the police, as you can see.
Widlaw Murancourt is the editor-in-chief of Igbo Post in the capital, Port-au-Prince.
Colombia is trying to help Haiti to track down informations which would go to the killers, to know a little bit more about their motives and who allegedly contracted them to assassinate the president, because that's, the big question. Who had an interest in killing the president? A lot of people had, but who effectively paid these guys to do it? And Venezuela condemned it, saying it's an attack to the democracy in Haiti. The U.S. condemned it, but at the same time, these countries, the U.S. and the United Nations, they are calling for elections. But the problem is you have an insecurity climate that do not permit to think that you can have free and fair election. A large swath of the country is being controlled by gangs, and these gangs are so powerful that they are more armed than the police officers. So how can you have an election, a free and fair election, in a situation like that?
Jovenel Moïse's assassination has created its own political crisis, with 2 competing prime ministers now vying for power. Brian Concannon is the executive director of the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti.
There's a crisis in Haiti. Members of the international community make a decision as to who they think could best lead Haiti out of the crisis. That decision is almost always wrong if it doesn't include broad buy-in from the Haitian people. And too often it doesn't. And this looks like that could be another situation. In addition to Prime Minister Claude having resigned a couple of days ago, he was never an officially installed prime minister. He was named in April, but he was never confirmed by the Senate as the Constitution required. So here you have an illegal prime minister who had resigned and is now unresigning, and that's who the international community appears to be giving full authority to. Everybody I've talked to in Haiti has been saying for over a year that the only way out of the crisis is some kind of a transitional government that has broad appeal and broad credibility with Haitian civil society that can run fair elections. Nobody in Haiti believes that the PHTK party, which has been in power, has any intention or ability to run fair elections.
Now the rest of the day's news. And taxation and vaccination, the words on everyone's lips at the G20 meeting in Venice. Finance ministers from the world's 20 largest economies are calling for a global corporate tax deal to be ironed out by October and also pressing for faster vaccine distribution. Let's talk to our correspondent, Ryan Thompson. Ryan, the global tax agreement dominates this agenda. There was progress on this at the G7 gathering. Where are we now? Where does it stand?
Hi, Jamie. Well, day one is finally wrapping up. We're just waiting for some of those ministers to leave and speak to reporters to give details on the status of everything. But going into today, this global tax plan was basically served up on a silver platter. It started, as you remember, as a G7 idea, and eventually those 7 leaders agreed to it over a month ago in Cornwall. And in the weeks and days since that point, it's really gone from an idea to some really formative policy led by the efforts of the OECD in Paris. So far, 130 global economies have committed to signing on to it, enacting these rules. There are 9 holdout countries, and we'll talk about those in a second. But once these rules finally go into effect, potentially as soon as 2023, it will mean over $100 billion in tax revenue for some of the world's economies here. The G20 has said that they have backed the ideas. All members of the G20 countries have said that they will sign on to this tax plan, but there are still 9 holdout countries within the OECD, and that's likely to be something that these ministers are talking about. How do they convince these countries? One of the big ones that we are talking about is here in Europe. That is Ireland. It is Europe's tax haven. They have quite a low tax threshold. So a lot of those tech companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook have installed themselves there, taking in, 500 million people worth of users taking advantage of the tax system. They don't want these rules to change because currently they're in their favor. Previously, when Ireland had to go up against the EU on this issue, well, the odds weren't exactly in their favor, right? We were about 27 member states against 1 country. It was on their side. Now they are going up against the OECD with the G20 backing. It's about 139 countries against 1. There are those 9 other countries that are on their side, but it will be much more of a difficult battle for them to fight.
Ryan, we're expecting to see a push for vaccine sharing in the joint communique, but without firm commitments to donate vaccines or fund COVAX, what does that actually achieve?
Right. Well, if you look back to over a month ago when that G7 summit and meeting ended in Cornwall, well, there was a pledge by these 7 member countries to give 870 million doses by the next 2 years, with half of them being by the end of 2021. It was kind of easy for them to offer it at that point, right? Because the vaccination campaigns in the UK and US and Europe were really kicking off. It seemed like something that was possible. The world has changed a lot in the months since then. We are talking about the rise of the Delta variant in the UK and slowly in Europe. We're talking about a 4th wave in some places. And now some of these big economies are saying, well, these shots that we had in our reserves that we were so ready to donate, well, we have to think twice about that now because potentially we will need to give away 3rd doses and booster shots by the autumn or in just a few weeks' time. It's something that's very much on the minds of these countries here. So, yes, we do expect these finance ministers to reiterate the message about vaccine sharing. It's been a common message we've seen. It's been something that economists have said, and they will agree with this, is needed in order to reenact the world economy and get it back into place. But ultimately, this decision is not going to be a decision made by the finance ministers, right, Jamie? It's going to be a decision that will have to be made by these heads of states, the G20 leaders, and they will have to make it in the coming days, in the coming weeks. Ultimately, it will be made by October when the G20 leaders gather in Rome for the final summit.
Ryan Thompson in Frankfurt, thank you very much.
China's producer price inflation dropped in June after a 12-year high in May. PPI rose 8.8% compared with May's 9% year-on-year. Analysts attribute the slowdown to a cooling off in the global commodity prices. China's consumer price growth also slowed, helped by a sharp drop in pork prices.
The global chip shortage has finally hit the world's largest car market. China sold just above 2 million vehicles in June. That's a drop of 12% compared with a year ago. But the country's overall performance remains robust in the first half of the year, with sales registering more than 25% growth compared with last year.
The UK's post-lockdown economic rebound slowed sharply in May. Gross domestic product expanded by a monthly 0.8%, faster than its typical pre-pandemic pace, but down from April's 2% surge. The Bank of England expects Britain's economy to grow by 7.25% this year, the fastest since 1941.
The European Union says the UK is liable to pay $56 billion as part of its post-Brexit settlement, a higher figure than the UK originally estimated. The EU says the money is owed for Britain's ongoing commitments to EU programmes it's still benefiting from, as well as other obligations. But a spokesman for Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the UK did not recognise that figure.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a crippling labour shortage. Why UK truck drivers say making them work longer hours is not the answer.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe, and quick reminder, CGTN is available to watch for free on all of the major digital platforms, on smart TV or online at Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
The US president will shortly sign a sweeping executive order to encourage more competition in the American economy. He's targeting corporate monopolies and their market power so they don't lock out smaller rivals. Joe Biden also wants to bolster antitrust laws and regulators. Let's talk now to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. So, John, Joe Biden's new measures designed to stimulate growth.
I know. Do you know, I have to confess, when Alice, our producer, told me about this story this morning, I was going, oh, really? That's not very exciting, is it? But actually, it is very exciting. And I will now attempt to tell you precisely why it's very exciting. You know, Joe Biden's shtick is about having a fairer economy. You know that. It was the same as President Biden, as President Obama as well. It's about having what Americans call a fair shake of the stick. And so he's signing today an executive order, and it will be 70 initiatives that involve 12 federal government departments here. And across the range of industries, it's going to affect things like agriculture and banking and the web and health But wait a second, John. Did you just say the web? I did. And this is where the story starts to get interesting, because they are targeting corporate consolidation. They really don't want these big corporations to be taking over each other, acting like monopolies, interfering with people's pay and benefits and all that sort of thing. And spookily enough, this week, right now, today, Friday, and I haven't mentioned this to you on our program this week because it just hasn't come up, the billionaires of U.S. industry are meeting in Sun Valley in Idaho. They're all there wearing casual clothes. This is in the northwest of the country. And they're having a jolly good time. They're partying and they're talking about deals and takeovers and just the sort of thing that this now is going to target. And all the big names are there. Jeff Bezos is there. Zuckerberg's there. Sheryl Sandberg is there as number 2. Bill Gates is there. Tim Cook and Shari Redstone, among others. She's from CBS Viacom. I don't think these people know what's going to hit them. I really don't. I think that they are sitting there in Sun Valley, in the sunshine, having a good time, and they're about to get clobbered by just the sort of thing that Biden is doing today, because he's ordering his departments to crack down on mergers and the leverage of data. You know, the incredible data that these companies collect on us, and they want to disperse the consolidation of these companies around the country much more than it is now. That's the idea. So this is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of them in the crosshairs right now. The order has gone out, or soon will, to scrutinize any kind of practices that these companies do much more closely, particularly the leverage of consumer data, because they want to help small businesses rather than these big corporations. Biden thinks that tech has outsized power in the U.S. economy, and he's already appointed people in the White House who are big tech critics. So the groundwork has been done ahead of this being signed today. Other issues, as you rightly say, include things like making it easier to switch jobs, switch bank accounts, to promote small business, to make healthcare pricing more transparent, and also net neutrality as well. That's an issue regarding making the internet freer and more easy to access for people with limited costs.
And also, John, yet more Chinese companies added to this US blacklist.
Yes, I know. Now, this story, it's relatively early in the day here, and I don't think the US Department of Commerce, who is behind this, has yet come out with anything concrete. So let me run you down what I know. It's in addition to the economic blacklist against some Chinese companies because of the issues that we see in Xinjiang, and also the use of very high-tech surveillance equipment. Now, I don't know sitting here whether it's 10 Chinese companies or 14. I think Reuters, the news agency, updated just now from 10 to 14. They added 5 Chinese companies last month as well. Let's hear now what the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to say about this. Take a listen.
The so-called U.S. Entity List is a tool to suppress certain Chinese enterprises and industries under the guise of human rights. It is also what the U.S. uses to destabilize Xinjiang and hold back China's development. China is firmly opposed to that and will take all necessary measures to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese companies and foil U.S. attempts to interfere in China's internal affairs.
Now, apart from what happened last month when 5 Chinese companies were added, this is not the first time that companies have been added to blacklists by U.S. administrations. It happened, if you remember, back in 2019. I remember doing it on the program back in 2019 when Trump was still the president. They added 20 public security bureaus and 8 companies for the same allegations about Xinjiang. Now, here in New York at the Stock Exchange, as you know, we have Chinese companies that have been delisted, and there are many, many American companies that are not allowed to do business now with Chinese entities, such as the China National Offshore Oil Corporation. But that is to do with alleged ties to the Chinese military. So there's the sort of two-prong effect going on here. As you know, we also have the anti-China competition bill working its way through the Congress at the moment. It's presently in the House. It's almost guaranteed to become law when it comes out of the House, and that's designed to hobble China's expansion plans overseas. President Biden, of course, has been far more aggressive towards China than I think anybody anticipated that he would be before he came to office in mid-January. Guys, back to you.
John, good to talk to you. John Terrett there in New York.
Summer may have arrived in Europe, but it's still not clear how many tourists will follow. The EU is now considering reimposing travel restrictions due to the growing number of COVID cases linked to the more contagious Delta variant. We're live to our correspondent Tony Waterman in Brussels. Tony, this will be received as very grim news. What's the latest on this you have for us?
Yeah, grim news for anyone that has a vacation planned in Europe this summer, because things are increasingly looking like they are in limbo as that highly contagious Delta variant just rips across Europe. The WHO says that infections are up 33% this week, and we're starting to see countries reimpose travel restrictions. Malta's health minister just announced that starting from next Wednesday, the country is only going to allow fully vaccinated people to enter the country, and it is not the only one imposing these types of travel curbs, and that is leading to concerns that this summer could be another financial flop.
Summer 2021 is at risk of ending before it really begins. The rapid spread of the highly contagious Delta variant is causing a worrying surge in new COVID-19 infections across Europe. The strain now accounts for more than half of new cases in Germany, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium.
It is progressively replacing all the other coronavirus strains.
Portugal, which was a front-runner in easing restrictions and welcoming tourists this spring, is once again a red zone, prompting a retightening of restrictions.
We have extended the requirement of the digital certificate or proof of a negative test to hotels and to access restaurants in high-risk zones on the weekends.
Most of Spain also in the red. The French government urging its citizens to vacation elsewhere.
The near 80% spike in new COVID-19 cases here in Belgium can partly be explained by a massive uptick in testing. Centers like this one in downtown Brussels have been flooded with people in recent weeks, eager to squeeze in a summer holiday before it's too late.
While no country is uttering the word lockdown, a patchwork of restrictions is creating confusion among travelers and threatens to undermine the COVID-19 certificate, which was designed to restore restriction-free travel across the bloc.
I'm anxious that I'm maybe can be blocked in Spain, and I'm not fully on vacation in my mind.
If someone wants to travel, I recommend they check all the new requirements, because it's hard work.
Adding to the pressure, the WHO, which has chastised Europe for lifting restrictions too swiftly.
The idea that everyone is protected and it's kumbaya and everything goes back to normal, I think right now is a very dangerous assumption anywhere in the world, and it's still a dangerous assumption in the European environment.
Some experts say Europe is already in the beginning stages of a fourth wave, and while the fully vaccinated appear to have strong protection against the Delta variant, less than half of the adult population meets the mark, setting the stage for another lost summer in Europe. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
As Mediterranean destinations reopen for the summer tourist season, France is employing a new weapon to deal with floating rubbish on the sea. The so-called jellyfish bot has been hoovering up discarded waste off the shores of the French coast. It's proved such a success, it's now being exported as far afield as Japan and Singapore. To see it in action, go to europe.cgtn.com.
British tourists have rushed to book flights after the UK government scrapped the need to isolate on return for the double vaccinated. Airlines reported a rise in ticket purchases hours after that announcement on Thursday. EasyJet said bookings to destinations on the UK's amber list surged by 400%. The change in rules has offered hope to the rather beleaguered tourism sector. However, the union representing UK border staff is warning tourists could face lengthy queues when they return because of a shortage of border force officers.
Researchers in the UK say 25 children died from COVID in the first year of the pandemic, although the overall risk to children remains low. The findings are being considered by the UK's Vaccine Advisory Group as they debate whether to offer the jab to under 18-year-olds. The report's co-author, Dr. Elizabeth Whittaker, who's a consultant in paediatric infectious diseases at Imperial College London, says the findings offer some reassurance to parents.
So this is 3 papers that we've put on the preprint server today, looking at children and who's susceptible to severe disease and how big a problem it is. And the reassuring message is that actually the number of children who are susceptible to severe disease and death from COVID is even lower than we've previously suggested. So that's a really good headline news. We identified 61 children who had died and had ever had a positive swab for SARS-CoV-2, and 4 consultant paediatricians independently went through their case notes to try and explore, did they die because they had the virus, or did they have another illness and the virus was not contributing to their death? And we identified really tragically that 25 children last year died directly because of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And of those 25 children, 6 of them were not known to have underlying health conditions, and the other 19 were known to have quite significant underlying comorbidities or life-limiting illnesses. And so the summary would be that for children with lots of comorbidities, they are at greater risk of becoming unwell with COVID.
So it looks like really reassuring news for parents then. But can any of this data be applied to the wider population?
It's mainly relevant for children. We haven't looked at older age groups, but we do know that young people in their 20s and 30s are also at lower risk, but they tend to transmit the virus a lot more. And this data is important in terms of policy. And so we've shared it with the World Health Organization, with our government here in the UK, and with the JCVI, which is the committee that decides about vaccines for children. And I think that it will be taken into consideration when we decide which population are most vulnerable and need prioritisation for vaccination first, when the JCVI decides whether or not to vaccinate children in our setting.
Well, let me ask you about that, because different countries have taken different approaches to vaccinating their children. But what do you think? What would you support?
I think it's a really complicated decision. I think the JCVI have been waiting to get all the information in one place to make a decision based on lots of different facts. And then the other thing is it indicated? And I think our data would suggest that it's not necessarily indicated for the personal health benefit of every child, but in terms of the bigger picture and the pandemic, it's having a huge impact on our children and young people, not because they get sick from the virus, but because of the mitigations and the impact on school and their emotional and social well-being. And so those factors need to be considered when that decision is made as well. And in my opinion, I don't represent anyone of this opinion, if we can be very confident about the safety of the vaccine, then it may be reasonable to consider vaccinating our adolescents if the vaccine supply is adequate.
But overall, a reassuring picture from these reports.
I think that parents can look at this data. It's incredibly detailed. We've been really fortunate to have access to really good data through the NHS, and it is very reassuring, I think, even for parents of children with comorbidities, that the risk is very low.
There's been a backlash from the UK's haulage sector after the government announced an extension of driver hours in a bid to ease its crippling labour shortage.
The temporary measure means drivers will be allowed on the road for an extra hour each day, now up to 10 hours.
Adrian Jones is the National Officer for Road Transport Commercial at Unite the Union. He says loading more hours onto drivers who are already exhausted is not the answer.
The respect that drivers deserve just isn't forthcoming from the government or from employers. So we've got drivers that can't even get access to toilets or get stopped somewhere so they can get something proper to eat. There's a whole range of measures that need to be taken by employers and the UK government to make driving a better profession for everybody who wants to come into it, and for those people who are members of our union that are already in the industry as well.
Part of the problem here is that drivers have to work within certain hours, don't they? They get to the end of their hours and they have to stop. I mean, that's one of the factors in this debate, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the laws that define the hours, the driving hours and the rest hours, are there for a good reason. That's to keep all road users safe, whether it be professional drivers or private drivers, you and your family on the roads of the UK. And they're really, really important. Unfortunately, they're high enough already, but the UK government feels that it's appropriate to relax them even further. So drivers will be forced by employers to work for longer, which puts everybody at risk. And Unite the Union is not prepared to stand for that, and will support any driver who refuses to work in an unsafe environment, because that puts everybody at risk on our country's roads.
Well, this looks like an escalating crisis. What are the consequences of this? Where does this end?
Well, the consequences, if you're asking me as a representative of drivers, the consequences need to be better pay, better conditions and more respect for drivers. From the general public's point of view, there may be problems in the supply chain, but we can resolve that with the proper actions and the proper resources put in from government and from employers. There doesn't need to be a crisis. This has been debated for many, many years and there's been next to no action. Now there needs to be action, and United is going to be at the forefront of that action.
Are we looking here at industrial action and perhaps shortages of products?
Well, shortages of products, that's down to the suppliers, the manufacturers, the retailers. If we're talking about industrial action, our members are becoming increasingly frustrated with the lack of action from the government and from employers. We need to see a transformation of the road transport industry. We are prepared to do that with employers and with the government. But it can't just be the drivers that have to pay for the failings of the whole industry.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, pleasing news for the panda population. China's most loved animal brought back from the brink of extinction.
The EU's digital COVID certificate, which offers the promise of unlocking hassle-free travel around Europe this summer.
In less than 2 weeks' time, the Czech border will also open to all EU and Serbian citizens.
4.4 million Hungarians received their first dose of COVID vaccine.
18 and over can receive a COVID-19 vaccination, but it does come with conditions.
Third wave will probably take longer to emerge. This vaccination centre is part of a massive effort to try and drive down the numbers of the new variant that was first identified in India.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Roger, Ricky, last clear.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Oh, no.
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN. Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Police in Haiti have shown video footage of 17 men arrested on suspicion of involvement in the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. They say the suspects are among a hit squad of 28, mostly from Colombia.
All in the same boat. G20 finance ministers meeting in Venice agreed to pull together on corporate tax, backing a proposed global minimum rate of 15%.
And as we've been reporting, holidays on hold. European tourism is under threat as the Delta variant spreads.
Taliban fighters have been extending their control of Afghanistan just hours after US President Joe Biden defended his withdrawal of American troops. Giving his support to diplomatic initiatives, Biden told reporters in the White House the future of Afghanistan lies with its people.
We did not go to Afghanistan to nation build. And it's the right and the responsibility of the Afghan people alone to decide their future and how they want to run their country. Together with our NATO allies and partners, we have trained and equipped over nearly 300,000 current serving members of the military, the Afghan National Security Force, and many beyond that who are no longer serving. Nearly 20 years of experience has shown us that the current security situation only confirms that just one more year of fighting in Afghanistan is not a solution, but a recipe for being there indefinitely.
Meanwhile, Taliban representatives are in Moscow for talks over the future of Afghanistan. The group has been giving assurances the country will not become a base for Islamic State fighters. Russia has been bolstering its troop bases in Tajikistan amid fears of a migrant crisis if Afghanistan descends into further bloodshed. We're live now to Kabul and CGTN's correspondent Sultan Faizi. Sultan, just how far are the Taliban advancing and what's happening in the districts that they now control?
Well, the latest is that Taliban have attacked PD7 of southern Kandahar province and captured 2 security outposts there. However, they are holding already around 10 districts in that specific province, but local officials said that they have repelled the Taliban attack, and the Ministry of Defense said that they have sent more deployment and they are getting prepared for more recapturing or retaking operations from the Taliban. So that was the Kandahar incident, but also there are fighting ongoing in Wardak province, in Kunduz, in Badghis, also in Ghazni, and there have been airstrikes. There have been back and forth pushing the Taliban Afghan forces or vice versa, but the Taliban are holding more key institutions of the Afghan government, which are the customs. Taliban recently, some minutes ago, actually announced that they have captured Abu Nasr Farabi customs in western part of the country. So they're holding now more of these customs. But the life under the Taliban are still contested, and people are worried about the public services, especially because the roads are blocked and people are stuck there where they are staying. So the situation is tense, actually, especially today, since the Taliban launched another major attack to one of the provinces.
What could be the effect of Russia, Iran and Turkey's involvement now?
It seems to be very important because Russia is actually now hosting the Taliban, and they want to make sure that there won't be any threat addressing Central Asian countries. Also, there are concerns that many weapons that have been seized by the Taliban or other different groups could actually into the hands of the Daesh, fighters. So that was one of the main or key concerns that Central Asian countries could have about Afghanistan. So they are talking to the Taliban, but also having an eye on to the border areas. Also, the effect of the other regional countries are more on the Taliban, especially diplomatic efforts in different levels, as Taliban were in Iran previously before going to Moscow, and there was a diplomatic effort with the Taliban and the Afghan politicians. Iran hosted, so there are, and also India has Afghanistan's peace in their visit to Moscow and their agenda. So there is a diplomatic and also an effort spent by the regional countries, as they will be the first countries if Afghanistan will be posing terrorist attacks or any threats toward these countries. So they will be affected first. So they have to talk more about the ongoing situation and sort out how Afghans need to come together for a political settlement. So it is quite important, and every country that you named have specific rules in bringing peace to Afghanistan or to mobilizing Afghan politicians for a national consensus.
Well, Sultan Faizi in Kabul, thank you very much.
It's estimated that 40% of Afghanistan's GDP is dependent on overseas aid. Rebuilding the economy is seen as critical to the country's stability. CGTN's Jack Barton reports from Mazar-e-Sharif on one small business meeting the challenge.
A dairy factory in Mazar-e-Sharif, northern Afghanistan. It provides income for up to 4,000 dairy farmers and stable employment for the men and women who work here.
We can change my life by working in this company because these companies have a lot of opportunity, especially the security and also environment is so satisfactory.
This is a rare sight in Afghanistan, and it's only been made possible because of the relative security here in Mazar. Elsewhere in the country, the economy remains in disarray. Even the capital, Kabul, has not been spared.
Day after day, there are suicide attacks and explosions. Once an explosion happens, everyone flees. Work dies for a week, 2 weeks, or even 3.
Since 2019, the economy has been shrinking. There were periods of strong growth before that, but most of it was linked to a lifeline of tens of billions of dollars in international aid filtering through a few hands.
The economic growth has not led to decrease in poverty. So income inequality stays the same, poverty grows larger, and it hasn't translated into decrease in unemployment, which makes the Afghan economy different from the rest of the world.
Another difference is the booming black market in metals, precious stones and opium, with most tax revenues going to the Taliban.
The only thing it is not translating into is the government revenue.
More than 90% of the official national budget still comes from foreign aid. A peace deal could change all of that. On top of abandoned farm fields and businesses, the untapped potential revenue from shuttered mines is estimated at around $3 trillion. But attacks and instability are only escalating as both the Afghan government and the Taliban attempt to strengthen their negotiating hands ahead of a potential peace deal that all Afghans hope will be reached.
I hope that in the future we will reach to a peace, and the peace talk will successful, so this country will become a very good country in the future.
Until then, this factory represents a glimpse of what Afghanistan might look like if 4 decades of war can be brought to an end. Jack Barton, CGTN, Mazar-e-Sharif in Afghanistan.
China's tech giant Huawei says it'll invest $150 million in digital talent over the next 5 years as part of its effort to find more sustainable solutions to environmental challenges. Huang Fei reports.
A digital economy should be, first and foremost, a green economy, so said Huawei's chairman Liang Hua as he opened the forum co-hosted by the UN-sponsored International Union for Conservation of Nature.
We've been using our experience in power electronics and energy storage, as well as expertise in 5G, cloud, and AI to drive sustainability. We need scientists, researchers, businesses, and organizations to work together to find a balance between growing our economy and protecting our planet.
One such example is the world's largest smart tracking solar farm in northern China. Huawei says artificial intelligence allows the solar panels to track the sun across the sky, much like sunflowers. It helps the farm generate 20% more energy than traditional solar farms, and this had helped turn a desert into a booming agricultural base. The World Economic Forum, which joined Thursday's talk remotely, says this nature-positive economy can unlock $10 trillion of business opportunities by 2030.
Further research also shows that every dollar spent on net zero and nature-positive activities, including ecosystem conservation and restoration, can generate up to $7 extra in the broader economy.
Thursday's discussions also looked at the area of education equality and how digitization can give better access to young people in remote areas. Huawei says it's been developing digital talent in countries it operates in, and that the new funding will benefit an additional 3 million people. When it comes to its own carbon footprint as a company, Huawei has yet to join a list of big tech firms in making carbon-neutral pledges, but says it is in the process of setting a goal.
Huawei's latest sustainability report says the information and communications industry can help reduce global carbon emissions by 20% by 2030. Huawei says it'll continue to do its part, not only by introducing more sustainable solutions into its own products, but also helping other industries reduce their emissions. One of the challenges in the future, though, will be using less energy to handle an ever-increasing amount of data, making digital technologies truly green. Huang Fei, CGTN, Shenzhen.
Europe.cgtn.com has all the week's top stories from China. Here's a quick take of some of them. All that and more at Europe.cgtn.com.
Now, some good news on China's most loved animals. For decades, the giant panda has been on the brink of extinction, but years of conservation effort has finally paid off.
China has announced that they are no longer endangered. Experts say there are now more than 1,800 pandas living in the wild. China's statement comes 5 years after the International Union for Conservation of Nature removed pandas from its endangered species list.
9 people have died after their plane crashed in Sweden. 8 skydivers and the pilot went down shortly after takeoff from an airport west of Stockholm. The police said the cause of the accident is not yet clear.
Dozens of people have died in a factory fire in Bangladesh. There have been 52 confirmed deaths, but many more are feared trapped after the blaze raged through a juice-making factory southeast of the capital, Dhaka. Several of the victims had attempted to jump from the building.
A week of heavy rain in much of China has caused widespread flooding along the Yangtze River. Floodwater has demolished houses and inundated crops and roads. Firefighters have rescued dozens of stranded people. Heavy rain is forecast to continue over the next 3 days.
14 cases of the Zika virus have been confirmed in India's Kerala state. Pregnant women are particularly vulnerable to the mosquito-borne disease, which can be passed on to their unborn children, resulting in life-altering conditions. There are currently no vaccines or drugs to fight the virus. India saw previous Zika outbreaks in 2017 and 2018.
The former South African President Jacob Zuma has lost a legal bid to overturn his arrest. He handed himself into the police on Wednesday after he was sentenced to 15 months in prison for refusing to give evidence to a corruption inquiry. Zuma's supporters burned tyres in protest at that decision. His legal team will be back in court on Monday, attempting to have his sentence reduced over what they say is his frail health and risk of catching COVID in prison.
A British police officer has admitted murdering a woman whose killing sparked widespread protests in March. Sarah Everard was abducted in London, then raped and strangled. London officer Wayne Couzens had already admitted kidnapping and raping her. Everard's murder prompted calls for tougher action on sexual harassment and violence.
France will stay engaged in the southern Sahara region despite the end of the French military operation in the Sahel. Emmanuel Macron was speaking after the latest Sahel summit, which was the first meeting of the French president and the 5 African leaders from the region since the announcement. Ross Cullen reports now from Paris.
The French president said that France will begin reconfiguring its military presence in the Sahel region of West Africa in the coming weeks. Emmanuel Macron announced a month ago that France was ending its Operation Barkhane mission and would, in the future, operate within a broader international alliance. This was his first official gathering with the G5 Sahel nations of Mauritania, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger and Chad since the 10th of June announcement of the drawing down of French forces battling armed groups in the troubled Sahel region of Africa. The French military mission has been in place since 2014 with two aims: to dismantle and disrupt the Al-Qaeda and Daesh-affiliated groups operating in the vast, loosely governed spaces of the southern Sahara, and also to bolster and train the regional armies. Now that mission is coming to an end after the deaths of more than 50 French troops, hundreds of local soldiers and civilians, and the displacement of thousands more.
The stabilisation of the Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger border zone and the ebbing of the terrorist grip on this region opens us up to the possibility of implementing, without further delay, the reconfiguration of our presence, according to terms and conditions set up with our partners and Sahel allies.
This was the first meeting of the leaders since the coup in Mali in May. The military officer who led that takeover of the government was also behind another coup in Mali last August. Colonel Assimi Goïta was attending the Friday summit after being installed as the transitional president in Mali. This was also the first time the presidents have met since the death of the former Chadian leader Idriss Déby in April from wounds sustained on the battlefield. Déby's son, Mahamat Idriss Déby, the 37-year-old general who is the acting president and head of the Transitional Military Council in Chad, was also in attendance at the G5 summit. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Nowhere to call home. The athletes who make up the Olympics refugee team.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. 29 athletes will represent an official team of refugees at the Tokyo Olympics. 9 hail from Syria, with 7 of them training in their host country, Germany.
Natalie Carney caught up with a boxer who's competed at the Games before, but this time he won't be flying the flag for his home nation.
In a small gym tucked away within an industrial area of the small German city of Saarbrücken, Wissam Salamana throws some final punches. In 1 week, he will be on a plane to the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Wissam won several national and international titles while on the Syrian national team, even making it to the Olympic Games 9 years ago. But his final knockout came when the war engulfed his country, forcing him and his family to flee the Damascus countryside in 2015.
We made this decision for us and also for our children. First, we went by bus to Lebanon, then from Lebanon to Turkey with the big ship, then by boat from Turkey to Greece, then to Serbia, Macedonia, Hungary, then we came to Germany.
He returned to boxing shortly after arriving in Germany. A year later, he placed second in the German national championships.
Wissam, along with the 28 other athletes on the refugee Olympic team, was one of 56 athletes who fled their home countries, but won a scholarship to train for the Olympics in his new home country. Having represented Syria at the 2012 Olympics in London, it's a dream for Wissam to be going back to the Games again.
Being on the refugee team this year means a lot to him.
I used to be part of the Syrian team, but that feeling doesn't play a big role for me. It doesn't matter whether it's for my home country or the refugee team. The main thing is that I can take part. I am representing the many refugees all over the world, not for just one country.
Under the Olympic flag, 29 athletes from 10 different countries will be competing in a dozen sports for the Olympic refugee team, representing more than 80 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. For those who have survived war, persecution, and the anxiety of exile, the Olympics provides an unconditional unity some on the team have never experienced.
Sport makes everyone happy because in sports people don't talk about politics or religion or black skin or white skin. Sport is sport and everyone has fun.
This will be Wissam's last Olympic Games. At 35, he will be above the age restrictions at the time of the 2024 Summer Olympic Games in Paris. But it's the journey to the Games and not about the winning, says Wissam's coach.
I am very, very proud of him. To find his motivation again, and after his escape from Syria, and then again to fight his way up to world-class level, and at that age. Well done. Wonderful.
Natalie Carney, CGTN, Saarbrücken, Germany.
And finally, this is the moment a teenager made American history.
Maria, M-U-R-R-A-Y-A.
That is correct.
14-year-old Zayla Avantgarde is the first African-American to win the Scripps National Spelling Bee, securing victory with the word Morea, which is a type of tropical tree. To reach that point, she had to spell out the words queremonious and solid ungulate. Despite practicing for up to 7 hours a day, basketball is her real passion. She holds 3 world records for dribbling multiple balls at once. But she scored $50,000 in prize money for her spelling achievement.
The headlines again. Police in Haiti have shown video footage of 17 men arrested on suspicion of involvement in the assassination of the president, Juvenal Moïse. They say the suspects are among a hit squad of 28, mostly from Colombia.
G20 finance ministers meeting in Venice have backed moves to establish a minimum global corporate tax rate of at least 15% in a bid to stop multinationals shifting profits into low-tax havens.
And the EU considers reimposing travel restrictions as the Delta variant spreads.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com.
We're on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app.
From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.